Welcome to another episode of Political Dregs. I'm your host, Calvin Robinson, British Jamaican. Joining me is Amir British Persian, Hamish Hunter, Yorkshireman / Scot, and Alex Prentice, our first guest. He is a Scottish nationalist. Alex, aka the Prenti. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
You're very happy.
I'm ecstatic, mate. The best results we could possibly have hoped for. I'm sure you agree on that.
Maybe not the best result. I'm pretty sure you could have hoped for a better result, maybe north of the border.
But a landslide victory is a landslide victory. Before we get into the ins and outs of it, could you give us a brief bio? Let the viewers know who you are, what you do.
Okay, I am obviously someone from Scotland, north of the border. Hopefully trying to represent some views that we have here. I've done a lot of canvassing over the years. Started out Liberal Democrats when I started my political career. Since then, switching over to the Scottish Green Party. The last few years, I haven't done much. I did campaign actually heavily in 2014 against breaking up the union. I campaigned for No. I was a heavy campaigner of that, and also in 2016, I was a heavy campaigning for Remain. Since then, the last few years, I've taken a few years out to maybe re-find my soul in where I should be having my allegiances to lie, I guess.
And if I'm right, the reason you campaigned to stay in the Union was because you wanted to leave the EU or remain in the EU? Sorry.
Remain. Yeah. So my huge swinging factor
double Remain.
Was, we were promised that if you vote to stay in the Union, your rights as EU citizens will be guaranteed.
Okay.
2 years later, we know what happened. So
you support independence now?
I wouldn't say I support it, but I wouldn't say I'm opposed to it. I'm kind of leaning more towards yes, like a lot of people. A lot of my friends who did like me, we were emphatic no supporters. We don't want independence. We have all these things we're getting assured. We're getting more devolution of power, or we're supposed to anyway. And we're getting to keep our EU citizenship because, applying for the EU is not a guaranteed thing. So we were emphatic no supporters. A lot of us now are kind of on that fence, leaning closer towards the yes side.
But so the UK is going to leave the European Union at the end of January.
Oh yes, definitely.
So whatever happens, the independence, IndyRef 2, is going to be held in the context of the United Kingdom being outside the EU and an independent Scotland having to join the EU from the outside, which is not by any means automatic. So doesn't that argument slightly fall away for the yes campaign?
It does and it doesn't, because there is all these sort of members of the European Parliament from the different countries. There's ones from Ireland, Spain, Portugal, who've all said that if Scotland to apply for it, they wouldn't be opposed to it. They'd be in favour of it. Obviously, they can't officially say anything on record until the UK has left the EU, because they can't infuriate, obviously, in member states. But they have said off the record that if Scotland was to apply, they would be happy to accept them into this process. The one that I was shocked at was obviously Spain.
Yes.
Members of European Parliament from Spain saying that. As long as it is legal and it's done legally, they don't see any problems with it, I guess.
I'm not surprised that the European Union would look favourably on Scotland joining, because it's an expansionist exercise. But do the people of Scotland, you might want to remain in the EU on the terms that the Brits have.
Yeah.
But do the people of Scotland want to join the Euro, join Schengen, all of this?
A lot of people, most people that I've spoken to who were on that no side, they're not opposed to the euro. They prefer to keep the pound if it was possible. But if it was a sacrifice they had to make, yes, they'd happily go for it. Schengen is, we're fine with that. A lot of our culture and a lot of people that I work with and meet are all European. We're a very inclusive society. This is why I think that the shift to independence has grown. We are seen as more inclusive and more European than the rest of the border. Okay, we're connected and we have similar cultures, but it certainly over the last couple of years has grown further apart.
So this is the bit that I don't understand, because it's not similar cultures. It's we are one united kingdom, and we're so tied together that we've been that way for centuries and centuries. So I don't understand how some people seem to have more of an allegiance with the EU than with the rest of the UK. That boggles my mind.
I think it's the way we're seen as the way we get represented. Obviously, Scotland hasn't voted for a Tory government in over 6 years. We've never backed really that sort of more, I wouldn't say right wing, because I wouldn't say it's full on right wing, but it's more right leaning from the centre, whereas Scotland is a lot more left leaning, certainly a lot more maybe left than actually centre.
But isn't that how democracy works? London's the same.
Yes.
London hasn't voted for a Tory government as long as I can remember. Well, except for the mayor, obviously. But in general, on a national level.
London is a city, not a whole country as a whole. It's fine different sections of different countries voting, separately. Think of the ex Labour red wall that's now completely or almost completely blue. But
Scotland is only a country in name, isn't it? It's as much a part of the state of the United Kingdom as California is a part of the United States.
Probably more so.
There's 2 signatures on the declaration of joining the Union. So it's, Scotland and England. We are both, at the end of the day, still separate countries. We have different supports that go for and against that.
You've got different legal systems, different education systems, different church.
Yeah, but that analogy works with the US as well, in that California has a different legal system to Florida, and California mostly voted for Hillary, but they're not going to say that Trump isn't their president.
Something
I guess, and I wouldn't say Boris Johnson. I wouldn't say Boris Johnson isn't the president isn't the Prime Minister of the UK. He's not. He is. He won a majority of government. He does have the right to be the Prime Minister. I'm not disputing that fact. As a whole, as a collective, yes, we did vote. But as Scotland as a whole, we decided no, we don't want that path. We want to go on a different path. And I'm not saying Scotland should get to choose its future. I'm not saying Scotland should emphatically be independent. What I'm more arguing for is that the Holyrood, the Scottish Assembly, should have that right to make, if we want to become independent.
So you want more devolution of power rather than actual independence, is that right?
This is why I'm still on the fence, but slightly more leaning towards the left. I think we were promised loads of more powers in 2014 if we did reject independence. We did. We see none of that come towards our way. I think if the only way, what Boris has to do, yes, Michael Gove this morning actually said that when Nicola Sturgeon requests for it, they're going to reject it. But I think that's the wrong move to do, because rejecting it is just going to push more people towards the independence. If we want to see a United Nation, he cannot accept, yes, you can have these powers. Maybe he limits the powers that when they get that, maybe, yes, you can have a referendum, but you can't have it until after the next Holyrood elections. And then you can't have it again then for 30 years, 25 years, but write that into the powers is probably the best way you should go about that.
So can I just ask, why would you object in the next referendum to other British citizens not having also the say over whether they want Scotland to leave their own country? So I personally, I wouldn't want to lose
Scotland, yeah,
a large part of my own country. So why do we not get a say also on whether Scotland?
My view on that is yes. If the UK want a full say, that is fine. But then we need to go back to the Brexit and give everybody, even EU citizens living in the UK and out with, or the whole EU area, should also be allowed that vote if we're including different countries into it.
I think it's a bit odd. I mean, I don't know.
I'm not sure how those are linked. To be honest,
well, but Joel, I don't think any country in the world, has had sort of independence where the rest of the country or the colonial power.
I'm making that point. It's not a sense of colonial. I'm making the point because the two countries are so intertwined for so many hundreds of years. It's virtually impossible to disentangle the links between England and Scotland. How would even citizenship work? That's another thing. Are you seriously saying that we would have Scottish passports and rest of UK passports, and then families who have had English and Scottish members for hundreds of years would have to split passports? I mean, this is absurd.
It happened with Ireland and Northern Ireland Republic.
Yeah, they got the option of both. They get to choose, obviously, what path you want to go on, which I think would be the same with us. We get to choose what way that we fall.
I mean, I think.
I mean, there is clearly a divergence here. There's clearly a difference in opinions and ideas and culture. Actually, it's very obvious that they're on a different path. And the question for me is whether we have done enough to give Scotland a good a reason to remain in the UK and or not
Yeah.
pursue this course of leaving the union. And
But I mean, of course, yeah, and then all subsidies would end.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go again. Yeah, all subsidies would end, of course. And you know, would you be happy with that? So
Yeah. I would.
Well, that's
How is
interesting,
it-
isn't it?
you'd have to try to get the EU to somehow replace those. And you know, as we've seen, they haven't been overly generous to smaller members in the past. So that's
Yeah.
another big risk.
It certainly is. It's a risk, but at the moment, the way we're heading is a way we don't want to be heading. We don't want to go for this, this Brexit. We don't want to be separated from the European Union. We want more to be aligned. And if it means, breaking away from the United Kingdom to take that risk, a lot of people I know have switched their allegiance to yes, we'll be happy to take that risk.
But do you think that overrides everything else, especially from a point of view where you'll be looking at being outside the European Union? Because that's the thing that Nicola Sturgeon is being quite slippery on, is because she knows now. Actually, she's feeling pretty confident. She's sounding pretty confident, but I suspect she's not actually that confident, because she's looking at having an independence referendum in the context of being firmly outside the European Union.
Yeah.
And having to make these arguments that even I don't think,
Do you think she wants to take the responsibility, Alex? Do you think Nicola Sturgeon wants the responsibility of being a head of state, or do you think she just prefers having this title, First Minister?
I think
that
she would
doesn't
be
have
happy
the
to take it, but she would pass it on quickly. I think she would be happy to take it and be independent for a bit, but she wouldn't hold it for long. I think she'd be more than happy to transfer it off to someone else. However, I think if we did become independents, we should then obviously we'd have to have a new election for our government. I probably wouldn't vote SNP if we were independent. I know a lot of people who have lent their vote to SNP for the independence, but as soon as that goes, they'll go back to voting Labour or Liberal Democrats. My old constituency, actually, of North East Fife was huge for Liberal Democrats. It was Ming Campbell for, 27 years or something ridiculous. In fact, it was more than that. He retired, and it's just gone back to the Lib Dems. But a lot of people in my area have lent their vote to the SNP in order to try and get that independence, because to reject Brexit and be like, right, the only way forward is with this. And there's other people coming around, not just SNP party members, but people like Gerard Killen, who was a former Labour MP for West Hamilton, I believe. He's now come out and said, I would support the powers being transferred to Scotland to give them another independence referendum. And that's from a Labour supporter. There's Lib Dem former MPs who've done the same and said, we would be in favour of transferring these powers to Holyrood so they can actually hold a referendum.
But are we actually talking about an independent Scotland? It sounds to me like we're talking about Scotland being part of the Union of the UK or Scotland being part of the Union of the European Union. What if, there's no guarantee that you'd be accepted into the EU, so what if you got independence and then weren't accepted into the EU? Could you survive on your own?
And that's the point. You would have to have that period
Yes.
in order to pass those tests, to meet the EU test. You'd have to be an independent
They would
country
change.
for
I'm
a
sure they
couple
would
of
change.
years.
They would change the circumstances.
I'm
They would
pretty
make
sure that,
exceptions.
Obviously, it's
But
not
it's a
guaranteed,
gamble.
but they would. Yes, it is a gamble, exactly. But there is most likely that they
Like
would
Brexit.
change the circumstances for the fact that we already meet these standards and are following these standards already.
Not the budget deficit.
Yeah,
I was
definitely not
about to say, it's fine because we have some nuclear weapons on the Clyde that we can gain money from renting that base that England are borrowing.
Oh, well,
Brent-
We can move that.
It's not
we
a
go.
shore guard. It's not a shore guard facility. It's not. Who's going to rent? It's like, you can't just put children's parties there. I don't know what.
I think he meant rent it to the rest of the UK.
Rent to the rest of
Oh
the
well, yeah, but then you're
you
supposed.
pay us
That
for
would,
holding their nukes.
yeah, but the SNP are supposed to be anti-nuke party. That would be a huge hypocrisy if they were.
Oh, I'm
making money.
definitely against it, mainly for the fact that depending on what part of the Clyde the submarine is on, means I'm either out with the blast radius or in the blast radius if it blows
Oh,
up.
great.
I know.
No, but we're all, look, mate, I live in London. First hint
Yeah.
of nuclear war, I'm getting turned into a shadow. So let's
Yeah.
not. No sympathy for you.
Exactly.
But do you not think? I think I have a real problem with the unionist message in that there really isn't one apart from the Scottish Conservatives, and they obviously cannot possibly hope to bring together the whole unionist vote.
Oh, yeah.
the fact that Labour has disappeared. I mean, it's extraordinary actually. If you think about the fact
Oh yes,
that Labour
it's definitely extraordinary. I grew up. My dad is from the west coast of Scotland. He's Labour through and through.
Yeah.
He was brought up in the Thatcher years in Glasgow. I mean,
yeah, and we talk about the Red Wall this time, but actually the Red Wall of the sort of M8 corridor of Labour support was bust by the SNP years ago, and we need that voice. We need that left unionist voice, and I'm very worried that we're not going to have that, because there is an argument, and there is an argument for unionism. It's not the sort of technocratic argument that was made last time, which just squeaked it. Can you survive? Of course, independent Scotland will survive. They'll have to, but we're not going to be. I think this whole thing about us, the Southerners, whatever, saying, "Oh well, we won't let you have the pound." I don't think that's going to work in the post-Brexit age.
It won't stand. Yeah.
No, but I think what would work would be if we made the case for what a shame it would be in terms of the historic links that we've had, and the fact that we should really have a shared identity, and it's a shame that that does.
But how do we make that case? What do we? I mean, I agree with Hamish and Joel on that. How do we make that case?
That's the difficult part. If we had, I know this is never going to pass. We had obviously a referendum on it in 2011. If the voting system was changed to be proportional, which is never under either Conservative or Labour government, that is never going to pass. First past the post helps those parties, both those parties, retain a majority government, unless we have something that, like obviously Holyrood is proportional representation. Unless we had that, there's no case to state we should be a union, because Scotland's voice is ignored and has been ignored for the last umpteen years.
Yeah, is it ignored just because they're in a minority? We had this discussion on Facebook. I'm not sure that being in a minority means that you're ignored. It just means that you're not the majority. There's a difference there.
Well,
I think Scotland has always exerted its influence within the union. I mean, I can't see. I don't think. Yeah, Scotland's voice has certainly been heard loud and clear
for the last few years, more so than ever.
But on the biggest issue since World War II, obviously it's been ignored. Right?
Yeah, well, it's not being ignored. Hang on. So
it has. It is.
In what way is it being ignored?
Because they don't want to leave the EU. I mean, come on, get with it.
But hang on. There's a difference between ignoring someone and not doing what they want.
Right.
That's true.
The point on the manifestly, because there are fewer people in Scotland than in the rest of the UK, or
I think
even in England.
There's more people. There's about 500,000 people more in London than there is in all of Scotland.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That in any system, in any parliamentary system, the number of members representing Scotland is going to be a minority.
Oh yes.
Sure. One of the slight difficulties is, ever since whenever it was 2015, and the SNP got 55 seats and have continued around that level, very few Scottish members have been in the government party, because by definition the SNP cannot form the UK government. So I think actually, I mean, it's not a great argument, but if the Scots started voting Labour, Liberal and Tory again, then they might find that there were more Scottish voices,
better representation
in London. But I mean, again, I've just said we shouldn't do this sort of technocratic, mean argument about unionism, but I'm going to do it now. You get more money per head than we do in England, right? I pay for your stuff, and I'm happy to do so because I like the EU. But I'm paying for you, and all I hear.
You mean you like Scotland?
Bloody hell! Let's redo that. Redo that, please. I'll cut that out.
What a revolution here!
I pay for you, and I'm happy to do that because I like the union. But all I get when I'm tired, working away, fingers to the bone, being a lawyer, very difficult, and hand over fist my money. It's all going to these Scots who then just whinge and moan about it.
Well,
Joel says, oh, why don't we have why doesn't the rest of the UK get to vote on Scottish independence? You'd win by a resounding majority.
No, I'm not sure I agree, because we would be giving up then the right to it's like cutting off a bit of your some of your arm. It's the same thing. I mean,
the bingo win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in your case, HO, speak for yourself, but but yeah, look, it's that's a British term. We all love it, but Look, yeah, I just think we've got to make that emotional case as well. You know, that we do consider ourselves to be British, and you know, this talk that the SNP have tried to commandeer the debate and try to speak for Scotland, and I think that's unfortunate. They can now say so even more. The first past the post system has really worked for them in this election, but in raw numbers, they don't have an overwhelming majority of the Scottish nation yet.
Close.
Close, yeah.
45% is more than 43.6%.
It works for Boris as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But
which is why.
But I think that the real test, as we're going to see now with this enormous majority for Boris, is his own commitment to the Union, both in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, which I think has fundamentally changed. And so, you know, for people who have grown up thinking of the UK, of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, I think that's you know, really going to be under test, under threat now, and the reaction and whether Boris does even needs to do much about it is going to be another question.
Well, how long does he have? Is this really a crisis point? Can we put this off a couple of years, see what Boris does to improve the relationships between the other countries in the Union, and then offer another referendum, or does there even have to be another referendum? Where are we?
So, all 48 MPs for Scottish SNP MPs and Nicola Sturgeon were in Dundee, my city, yesterday. And from what I've spoken to my friends who were there, meeting them, talking to everybody, Nicola Sturgeon will be sending this article this week to Boris to request the powers for.
And will she say the material change is that the UK is definitely leaving the EU now? Is that what she would say? Yeah.
That's most likely the material change that's been different
since the last.
Yeah, exactly.
Would this be different if Scotland had a similar kind of arrangement as the Northern Ireland?
I think yes. If Scotland got that option that Northern Ireland Assembly has, obviously Stormont's not sitting, but if they had that option to veto everything that's coming their way, if they had that option to maybe retain some of the EU stuff that Northern Ireland gets the option to keep, I think it would be a different story. Which I think is an option that it should be explored by Boris to maybe.
He's got the majority for it.
He's got the numbers now to do that massive, water down Brexit even more.
Exactly.
And then let's, as I said, the other thing to watch is just how watered down this ultimate deal becomes. And so the arch Brexiteers, Calvin and Hamish, just have to accept an even more watered down version of.
But he doesn't have to water it down now.
He does because the Union is at stake. He does. Yeah. You have to see this for what it is, Calvin. You can't just keep. Wait, let me finish. You can't just. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but.
Okay.
You can be rude to him. You can be rude.
You can't just keep on ignoring the issues that are on the horizon, and we've been having this debate for the last 3.5 years. Our union is at stake.
But I'm saying our union is stronger than our relationship with the EU, and it's bigger than that. After we've left the EU, we can re-strengthen our relationships with Northern Ireland and Scotland.
If you look, the SNP, Sinn Féin, all of these rabble of separatists are going. You know, it's not like just because of leaving the EU, and if we hadn't voted to do that, suddenly they wouldn't be calling for independence. Right? They would do it at any opportunity. I mean, basically, the minute that they
that's their job, though.
Yeah, exactly. So whether we leave the EU or not, whether we have a watered down Brexit or not, they're still going to be banging that drum for independence because that's the only drum that they bang. And it also means that they can avoid questions about the Scottish Health Service, Scottish education, which is just at the moment just terrible. It's the envy of the world.
The Scottish Health Service is actually best at the United Kingdom at the moment, with waiting times and everything.
But as a teacher, we used to look up to the Scottish education system, and now it's the worst in the Union. What happens?
There's some serious problems with the SNPs. You know, you talk about wanting more devolved government. Frankly, if I lived in Scotland, I'd be like, get this stuff away from these people who cannot run it.
It's because the SNP have taken on the mantle that they are Scotland, and essentially, I just feel that any registry, for Scottish citizenship would essentially be an SNP monitored registry. There's a creepy side to them that I find, and that's only been reinforced by their behaviour in this election. But obviously, if people are using them as a gateway to get extremely much more devolved powers for Scotland, or for Scotland to take a different path, then they're going to build that pressure, aren't they? But I think certainly for now we've got to say firmly no. But I mean, if Alex is saying it's an inevitability, maybe there is an inevitability about this. But I think that that narrative will start with Boris initially saying no now,
Well, I think our priority has to be denying the SNP
the Scottish,
to go to government in the next Scottish government election.
My argument for that is Jackson Carlos, the Scottish Tory leader or interim leader, stood on a manifesto in Scotland saying, "Look, if you want to deny another independence referendum, vote for the Scottish Tories." The vote fell. They lost over half their seats as well.
That's true. They really didn't have.
All the Scottish Tories did was fear mongering. Now, if Ruth Davidson hadn't left the party, I think you might have had a different story. I think that decline in Scottish Conservative vote wouldn't have been as drastic. I still feel there would have been a decline, but some of the close seats that the Conservatives did lose, I think they might have just held on to. But
are there people who are there unionists who, given the choice between voting Tory and saving the union and not and letting the SNP, I'm just trying to gauge the level of the sort of cultural feeling. Would more of them go, I can't vote Tory, fuck the Tories, and I don't, I'll have to sacrifice the union?
Yes, the people that I know that do vote Conservative are like that. They're like, if we have to, they're pro EU. If they said if we have to sacrifice the union, as much as they don't want to, they see themselves as Scottish, British, and European. If they have to let one go, they will reluctantly have to let the British part go in order to be European.
I just don't understand where this sort of weird, zealous love for a trading bloc has come from. I mean, it's the union of the...
Yeah, it's because, I suppose, Scotland, to be fair, I've seen the example of the Republic of Ireland now and the way that Varadkar has used the EU's supposed, solidarity to give him leverage.
Hamish, I think it's more than that. It's about shared values, about identity.
A tiny little nation in the North Sea.
I don't trust them to do that, but I think that's what
this is more than just economics. This is about values. It's about identity. It's about being part of something bigger and greater, and being kind of being part of something that the whole world admires. You have to see from their perspective.
I mean, that is.
They do. I mean, maybe
absolutely.
No. So the question is, why do they not?
There are many countries in the world, especially in the third world, who admire the EU.
So why do they not feel that way about Britain?
Exactly. We need to stop talking down the EU and keep talking up Great Britain again. We need to make Great Britain great again.
I'm not talking anyone down. I'm just stating.
No, but exactly what you said there about feeling part of something bigger. That's what being Scotland should feel as being an integral part of Britain.
But we've had decades of intellectuals and academics talking down our nation.
Alex has been very clear that the Scottish people don't feel represented in Parliament, which is governing the whole country. So he said it. He said if there's proportional representation where the Scottish MPs have a part to play in government, where they have ministers.
The solution to that is to vote for British parties that participate in Westminster and believe in the country, in being part of the British country, as opposed to separatist parties.
And the Scots, they have their own parliament. They control their own health and education service. They've got more public spending per head than the rest of the country. They've had prime ministers from Scotland, probably more than any other sort of region of this country. I mean, I don't see what more they could want. And going independent, even within the EU, you're not going to get Scotsmen and women striding the world stage. You're not going to have Scotland as an international power because the rest of the UK will take that role. They're not going to be in the UN. They're not going to be in NATO and all these places. And I think that I said it when we discussed the union on the last podcast. The Scottish history is not an insular little William Wallace country. It is a globalist, outward-looking, conquer the world sort of place, sort of culture. And I get very upset by this kind of, okay, you might be upset we've left the European Union. I'm sorry about that, but it really isn't the beginning, the be-all and end-all. And I think in 50 years' time, we're going to look back and say, I can't believe we got so upset about a little trading bloc.
I think it's more about our voice not heard, because it is heard, but acknowledged. We are supposed to be treated as an equal part of the union. This was a whole thing about 2014. We are an equal part. We want Scotland to be front and centre in all this sort of stuff, but we haven't been front and centre. We haven't been given that respect or listened to or acknowledged. The fact that 62% of Scotland, obviously we're going back to Brexit here, but 62% of Scotland said no, we want to stay in the EU. We haven't even been given an option like Northern Ireland has been given. We're just been, nope, you're coming with us. Let's go.
Well, that's one of the reasons I don't like. That's one of the aspects, by the way, of the Northern Ireland thing that I don't like, because I do think that's wrong. Actually, it's kind of difficult when if this was a country, if we were a country of 30 million and 30 million, then absolutely. But we're not. We're a country of whatever it is, 60 million and 5 million.
I think it always comes. It always comes back to Brexit, doesn't it? And I think getting Scotland back on board is going to be the same argument as getting the rest of the Remainers in England and Wales and Northern Ireland on board as well. In that, just selling our country and reminding people that we can do it alone. Because we're not alone, we're together, and we are a great nation, and just reminding the world and each other of that. I think that's what Boris's job is now, not just talking to Scotland and recognising them and making them feel heard, but just all of the Remainers in the whole of the United Kingdom, making them feel like we are part of something, and that something is special and unique and important.
Yeah, and that's going to be an uphill battle for him. I was watching closely as he visited Scotland. That's when his the Conservative points kept on dropping in Scotland. I think he needs to do it, but in a more clever way that's going to see as if Scotland's going to benefit from it. Him coming up himself is only a more case to break away from you. I think that's what a lot of people see.
We need to deploy Ruth, don't we?
Well, yeah, but she just doesn't agree with Boris, which is obviously one of the reasons she's stepped down.
Scottish Tories need to be more than just Ruth Davidson, though.
I know
they do.
Yeah, I know, but we're in existential crisis territory now.
Exactly, and when you've got people like Jackson Carlaw, who's gone back on what the Scottish Tories have said 6 months. 6 months ago they said, okay, we want to be pro-EU, we don't agree with this sort of stuff and this, that. But then Jackson Carlaw comes in after Ruth Davidson stepped down, and he's flip-flopped exactly what they said 6 months ago. It's this matter of trust. We don't trust the Scottish Tories at all.
Well, I think that's a brilliant point to end it on.
And that's exactly why the Scottish Conservative Party cannot be the sole advocate for unionism.
Exactly, and the fact that Labour...
They can fund it, Tories can fund it, but you need the lefties doing that.
What you need is a Brexit party for Scotland, like a Scottish Unionist Party.
0.1%. The Brexit Party got 0.1% in the vote in Scotland. They got 13,000 votes.
I don't mean
MP has more of a majority than.
I don't mean from that perspective. I mean that's not politically aligned to the right or the left. That gets people from all different sides together for one united cause, and that cause should be the union
to remain.
Well, I think we should be running unionist candidates.
Yes, it's a way, but then people argue with the political ideology of what they stand for, because people will always identify towards the left and the right, especially more in Scotland when we're more a remaining country as opposed to the split you've seen in England, as opposed to it's no longer are you Labour or Tory, it's are you a Leaver or a Remainer.
Yeah,
it's that split's changed, but in Scotland we're still, we're a heavily Remain, so we will back what we want to go for.
There we go. We've heard the Scottish voice. Thank you very much, Alex Prentice, for coming on. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Hamish and Amir. And at some point, Joel Davidson popped in with his cat, I believe. Please join us again. Like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Bye.